I'm now at the Park of the Aqueducts. So there's a few aqueducts here, notably the Aqua Felix and the Aqua Claudia, but there's a lot more. So there's both ancient Roman aqueducts and even some aqueducts that were added later. So we have a rather complete section of aqueduct in front of us. Part of it has arches, whereas part of it is filled in and does not have arches. So let's go walk underneath it and have a closer look. You'll notice it's closed up top. Roman aqueducts were closed on top to stop things from falling in the water. And even in some cases, to preserve pressure when going through a valley or something, for example. So this aqueduct is not really what we imagine when we imagine aqueducts, right? It's not very tall. We imagine these incredibly imposing structures. This arch here is maybe 10, 11 feet high. And it's not that wide either. I'd put it at maybe 7 or 8 feet wide. But that's just my estimate. As we emerge, we see the aqueduct continue the distance. And over in front of me is another portion of aqueduct. So I believe that is the Aqua Claudia. So this is really just a nice, beautiful park. It has a bunch of trees and people come here to relax. They walk their dogs, they go jogging. It's really a living place full of locals. It's very much not a tourist spot at all, which is nice considering how crowded some of the spots in Rome can be. It's about 3 p.m. on a Friday right now. I'd imagine on weekends this place might be a little bit busier. We might see some more activity when people get off their jobs. So as we come over this hill, we're gonna get a good view of this aqueduct here. This one is, however, much less complete, but is much more imposing and much more what we imagine an aqueduct looks like. I'm gonna wait for this plane to pass. So this is the Aqua Claudia. It's a lot more what we expect when we imagine an aqueduct. It's very tall, very much more imposing than the last aqueduct we looked at. So this one is much less complete. There are segments of it extending that way and back that way towards Rome. So the Roman aqueducts were not just for drinking water. Of course, they were for the baths as well. So I've heard the question asked, why didn't the Romans use the aqueduct to power water wheels? The answer is they did. Most famous is the water wheel complex in Barbegal in France. That was used to mill grain, but aqueducts in Rome also milled the grain. Now I don't know if these aqueducts powered water wheels, but we know from Procopius that on the Janiculum there were a series of mills that were used to mill the grain. And we know this because when he was protecting the city of Rome from the Gothic invaders, the Goths smashed some of the aqueducts. They smashed the aqueducts of Rome, and that's when they broke. So by smashing the aqueducts, they no longer had water to mill their grain. I'm gonna wait for this train to pass. So the Goths smashed the aqueducts, and when they did that, the mills no longer had their water. So what Procopius and his generals decided was to put some water wheels in the Tiber River to actually mill the grain, and it worked. And then there was sort of a weird arms race where the Goths decided that, they would throw logs down the Tiber to break the water wheels. When the Romans figured this out, they had these long sticks with hooks that they would use to get the logs out. And then eventually I think they may have barred off the Tiber to stop the logs from coming in. So that happened in the 6th century AD during the Gothic Wars. You can read Procopius to find out more about that. All right, so let's get up close. So there's train tracks on the other side of this aqueduct. I think they're going to Termini Station. I think that's where they go. I'm gonna get as close to them as I can. See, this is just a nice quiet park. People come here to go on hikes, to walk, to relax. It's really just a nice place. see if we can get a better look at the aqueducts. Makes the sky appear very bright, but at least we can see the detail a bit more easy. There's some more ruins here. Perhaps a branch of the aqueduct. Perhaps something else. So here we have a little bridge that goes over probably what's a stream when it's more wet. I suppose it's dry now. Don't know if it's natural or if this was dug in later times to supply water to the city of Rome. I do know that they did construct canals at some point, I think, during the medieval or Renaissance period. But I'd have to check on that because I'm not sure. All right, so let's continue and try to get closer to the aqueduct. Here are some remnants of the aqueduct. And there you can see some hills in the distance. And these are huge. That gives you an idea of the scale of these aqueducts. So at the top of the aqueduct, we can actually see the channel where the water would flow. So you might be thinking, wow, that's pretty big. That looks like it's big enough for someone to stand up in. So they needed to clean and maintain the aqueduct, so they didn't make it tall enough for someone to stand up. And you can see the remnants continue that way, towards the source of the water. Since this is right next to the train tracks, I'll have to keep an eye out for when I go to Naples in a few days. I'll be taking the train then. This portion looks like it was reconstructed with brick. I don't know what era that was done in. It might be ancient bricks. A lot of ancient construction used that sort of very flat brick, so it's possible. See, there's even some white bits there, probably of marble or travertine. The road continues here underneath the arch. Oh, that's real high. Of course, some graffiti. Now we're right by the train tracks. And the path kind of stops. Well, I could go down there, but maybe I won't. We are right by the train tracks after all. Who knows what kind of characters could be hiding out in between the aqueduct and the train tracks. Maybe we will go down that way. I'm curious. Oh, there's a condom here. That's not a good sign. Yeah, maybe I'll turn around. Remnants of some sort of path. Some weird tunnel over there. Probably best to avoid that. Rome is generally a safe place, but I like to avoid any sorts of encampments or things like that. All right, so let's walk back this way, and then we're gonna cross that other aqueduct there, the Aqua Felix. Pulcro a camera. Camera means room in Italian. So again, just like along the Via Latina and the Via Appia, the tombs were outside the city. And that was for hygienic purposes. You don't want to bury your dead in the city because you'll have diseases and, that's not fun. So that's why you find a lot of tombs here. I was in Egypt last year, and of course, they're known for the pyramids. They're known for their tombs. But generally, we don't think of tombs when we think of Romans. But they had their tombs. The most famous tomb, actually, is a castle. Castel San Angelo is the Pope's castle, or maybe one of his castles. I don't know if he has more. But Castel San Angelo used to be the tomb of the emperors. So starting in the 2nd century, I believe with Trajan, it was constructed as a tomb for the emperors. And later, when the Aurelian walls were built in the 270s AD, it was incorporated into the defenses of Rome. Just like the Pyramid of Cestius, which is another famous tomb in the city. And when the Romans were defending the city against the Goths in the 500s, and again, you can read about this in one of Procopius's works, they broke up the statues and used them as projectiles against the invaders. What a tragedy to lose those works of art because of a war. Of course, the war was part of Justinian's reconquest, which brought the city back under Roman control for another 2 or so centuries. Justinian was the Roman emperor ruling in the east from Constantinople. You might hear his empire referred to as the Byzantine Empire, which is the same thing as the Eastern Roman Empire, or at this point, the sole Roman Empire, so just the Roman Empire. Of course, the Roman Empire would fall in 1453, the hands of the Turks, who employed cannons to destroy the otherwise impregnable Theodosian walls, built in the 5th century. Now we're back to the first aqueduct that we crossed, the Aqua Felix. So the size of the arches actually alternates from small to large. I wonder why they made it that way. So now I'm walking south where there are more aqueducts. But these two, the Aqua Claudia and this one, the Aqua Felix, are the main ones. So here we have a little stream. I believe this was constructed to supply the city, or maybe the farms, with some water. It would make sense that you construct this on the same path as aqueducts, because aqueducts used gravity to move the water from a high place to a low place. And you can do the same, of course, with just an ordinary stream. So that stream is the Aqua Mariana Canal. So it dates back to the 12th century. It was built by Pope Calixtus II. So it was water for the farmed fields, the various mills that were built within the Aurelian walls, so within the city. The channel changed course at a certain point. These days, the water that feeds the canal comes from the Aqua Felix, which is this aqueduct back here. And the water flows here after feeding a small pond. And then they go into the Almone River. So this seems to be a segment of a different aqueduct, which the Aqua Felix then goes under. So that's maybe 4.5 to 5 feet tall, I'd say. You could walk through there if you crouch down a little bit, but I won't be going in there. So this seems to be running right by the Aqua Felix. Or I wonder if it's not an older portion of it? I'm not sure. You know, we think of the aqueducts as being things from a long time ago that aren't used anymore. But actually the Fountain of Trevi in Rome is still fed by an aqueduct. I might go there later. Such a beautiful view, so many nice trees. These are the pines of Rome. Yeah, it looks like it goes right above that aqueduct. It wasn't unusual to incorporate older buildings into newer ones. Saved resources and time, so it's entirely possible. I'd have to read up on this a little bit more. But there you see the other aqueduct is only on one side of it. So it's possible that they decided that the course that was good for one aqueduct was good enough for the other aqueduct. While I'm here, let's have a look at those mountains back there. Then over there are some apartment buildings. Imagine renting an apartment right by Aqueduct Park. That would be great. What a great spot. So the aqueducts probably go all the way to those mountains, because after all, they need to get their water at a higher altitude. And the only thing that's that high is those mountains. Or at least the only things that I can see. So here we actually have a much more complete segment of the Aqua Claudia than we had earlier. Oh, look at that go. It's a pretty long segment. I'd say a few hundred meters long. So I think we're nearing the end of the park. So the park actually does go on for quite a while. But I think I'll be stopping around here. I will be going back for one last thing though. But it's kind of hot and I need a break. So I think I'm gonna go sit on that bench. So this is interesting. This is actually part of the Via Latina that I was just on earlier. Look how much lower it is compared to the surrounding land. It's how much the ground level has changed over the centuries. possibly from the silting up due to floodings from the Tiber River. So that's how much the ground has risen over the centuries since the Via Latina was built in the 300s BC. This is a very old road, older than the Via Appia. So this portion of the Via Latina was actually used in medieval times to transport water for crops around the city of Rome. Interesting how they reused this road for a canal. I guess it already had a solid base, so might as well reuse it, because they surely weren't using it back then. I'm always fascinated by the places you can see the wear from the wagon wheels. They wore down the stone over time. It's absolutely fascinating. So I'm on my way to the park of the Fiscal Tower. So that's a medieval tower that was built by a wealthy family, and they stored their wealth there. So that's why it's called the Fiscal Tower. This is a really weird path. This is tall grass, there's cactuses on either side. You can see the tower in the distance. There's a field over there. Kind of smells like animals, though I don't see any at the moment. What are these grasses? Weird. Is this bamboo? Huh. Anyway, it looked a little sketchy, but this path exists in Google Maps, and it's the way to the park of the Fiscal Tower. And there's the tower right ahead of us. So this is right outside of Aqueduct Park. And there's the tower. As we get closer, we'll have a better look. That was a sketchy walk. So this tower is built at the intersection of two aqueducts, the Aqua Felix and the Aqua Claudia. Yeah, you can see it's actually quite incorporated into the structure. That's an economic use of materials. So here's the base of the tower. And you can see very clearly, well, this used to be aqueduct. And all that is tower built atop it.